Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Love Akron Live, right here, June 24th. Wow, June the 24th. Wasn't it just February? My name is Benjamin Beaver, and I'm so excited to get to be here with my dear friend, Miss Lori Porter. Where are you zooming in from, Miss Lori, and how are you today?
Oh man, we are zooming in from the church, and we've got quite a few projects going on here today. So undercover, I look real nice here, but I actually have on tennis shoes and capris.
Oh, yeah, it's the fun thing about Zoom meetings that at first everybody was like, ha ha ha, ha. And then you're like, I'm wearing shorts to every meeting, man. No
Right,
big deal. So
right.
Miss Lori, this morning we got to have a great conversation with a bunch of people about civility,
Yeah,
and it was just a wonderful conversation.
yeah,
Now a couple hours past that, been in a couple meetings, we've been running around. Now we're on Love Akron Live, and we're going to be
yeah.
actually looking back at last week's conversation
Hmm.
called The Connection versus Collision, the black and white
Right,
conversation.
right.
What's been going through your heart and mind this last week, Miss Lori? Like, I hear a lot of people that look like me in the last little bit have been saying, "Oh, I've been reaching out to friends of mine," uh, you know, uh, and I just asked, "How are you?"
Yeah.
And that's what I want to ask you today.
Ben, actually, I'm doing fine. I could accredit state of my mental state, my emotional state. I could accredit that to my spiritual state because it's because of Christ in my life that even long before I was a pastor, that I was able to find and maintain a balance in my life. So it doesn't matter what goes on around us. Scripture tells us, what does it say? We are troubled on every side, but not,
Crushed,
right.
crushed, and not perplexed. All depending on which translation you're going
Yeah,
in.
right, right. And so I just always feel like, for me, that whatever is going on, I'm always, seeking direction from the Lord. Like, what is going on in the world, and who is it that you're trying to get a message to? I think when we look biblically at the Word of God, we see oftentimes, hate to pick on the children of Israel, but they were at the crust of everything that was happening when you look at Old Testament, and they were always in trouble because they continued time and time again to forget about God. And I think that America, whose money says, "In God we trust," she has forgotten about the God that she said she trusted in. And so, our country is a huge melting pot. And so we have all kinds of religions and faiths and beliefs in our country. And I don't know, Ben. Part of me feels like God is trying to get our attention. Remember, only good and perfect gifts come from the Lord. But there are things that if we don't do as the word has instructed, there are things that prohibit God from coming to our rescue. And so, for me, how am I doing? I had a few friends that look like you, meaning white, that
I was about to say, I don't know if you have too many friends that actually look like me. Maybe the color of my skin,
yeah,
but
for your red hair and beard, right? Actually, my cousin Isaiah Templeton has a red beard. He's about a little lighter than me. Interesting, right?
really,
Yeah.
cool.
So, but yeah, I think I'm okay. I think for me, social media, I don't get caught up in, flicking through social media all day long. If you do that, it will have you almost living like the stereotype that creates all the many biases that we see in our world today. So I think you have to be careful of what you ingest to ensure that you can stay balanced and fruitful, that you won't become a menace to society, which then puts you in the same boat as some of the people that, folks are struggling with today. So, I'm good. I'm a Black woman who has Black children, who has always prayed for my kids. It's interesting enough, and maybe most parents don't do this, but sometimes I can know my son doesn't live very far from where I do. And even the other day, my daughter was at his house and she said, well, I'll be headed, home in a little bit. And I just, maybe about 15, 20 minutes later, I just heard all these sirens. We live in West Akron, and just sirens, sirens. It seemed like every 5 minutes. Finally, after about the third or fourth time I heard a different set of sirens, I just picked up the phone and called. I'm like, hey, checking on my peeps. Just making sure everybody's okay. Too many sirens going on over here.
Too many, and especially as a mom, and with all of the and like you said, as Coach said last week, you have a double blessing as a black woman. That was funny.
Yeah.
A Black woman, and in so many ways. But as a mom too, like it's like the sad reality is that's the privilege that I have with my kids as they grow up, that if they get pulled over, I'm not as worried about it, to be honest with you. Like,
nope.
And I told somebody earlier this week, I said, the more I learn with Love Akron and Miss Lori and Coach, the more I can't unsee this.
Yeah.
I can never go back to full ignorance, and I got a lot to learn still, don't hear me wrong, but it's this level of like, once you've seen it and started to, I almost say experience, but that would be wrong to say it that way. But I guess starting to grieve with my friends, and maybe that's a good way of saying it. Yeah. What were you going to say though?
I was saying, the opportunity to press in and try to understand it. You know what I'm saying? I will never be a man. So, but there are things that men go through that I can be empathetic toward. There are things that I can press into, understand, and absolutely share in their grief or whatever the struggle it causes for them. But yeah, Ben, I just think that, for Black people in America and maybe in the world at large, we are doing more of what we've always done. It's just been more intensified and more commercialized. A lot of what we're encountering today is not any different than what was encountered in the 60s. I remember being in the back seat of my mom's green station wagon and coming home. And we lived at the top of what is Vernon Odom now, Worcester Road, Worcester Avenue back then, or Shabundi Hill, if you want to go further back. Look at deeds, and it actually is Shabundi Hill. Like, what was that? But I can remember race riots. I can remember riots on Worcester Avenue and coming through Worcester Avenue. And I think it was one of the Watson boys, one of the Jeffrey Watson's older brothers, the Watson boys that used to live on, I think they lived on Diana Street. And I saw, big muscle bound Black guy. And I remember him saying to somebody that was trying to stop my mom, let her through. And I thought, thank you, God, that we knew the Watson boys, right? So we went home. That was just in the 60s, So in my lifetime, I can remember when President Kennedy was shot. I can remember when Dr. Martin Luther King was shot. I can remember the somberness that filled homes everywhere. If I was at my home with my parents or at my grandmother's home, the country grieved the loss of these great men. And so, yeah, here we are today. And I think that we have to, ask ourselves, I think as Black people, what part have we played in allowing this to continue? And I think that white people have to ask themselves the same question. What part have we played in allowing this to continue? It has been hidden for a while, but social media has now brought it to the forefront and to the light, because without people recording these incidents and things like that, we would have no idea.
It would just pass by a normal, sadly normal, unseen violent act.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's man, and this is why we're actually going to be today Love Akron Live. If you're just joining us, welcome. My name is Ben Beaver. This is my friend Miss Lori Porter, and we are actually going to be rewatching some of our conversation from last week. And we had a fantastic conversation. In fact, I think I was up till probably about 3 a.m. like that day. And I'll be honest with you, Miss Lori, it's like I couldn't. Now, sometimes I can't shut off my brain in general, but like it's like I had to process it somehow.
Yeah.
I had to, and the thought that kept going through my mind was the gal who lost her life, who was murdered right in the middle of Akron in broad daylight.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was saying earlier, it's like now that I've seen this, and I love the perspective that you're bringing to it as my friend, as like, this ain't new, Ben. Well, it's new for some people though.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it's new for me as a white guy. It's new for me as a guy in his 30s. And it's an opportunity. So right before we jump into watching this video and stuff, is there any difference between what was then and what is happening now? Or maybe the same thing is like, is there something we have to keep in mind between what was then and what is now?
Yeah. The young lady, her name was Nakia Crawford, I believe was her name, last name Crawford, that was shot, the 17 or 18-year-old senseless death, which by the way, Ben, the guys that they're looking for, it was rumored out that it was a white guy that shot him, and come to find out it was Black people that shot her. The thing about violence is violence, and it really doesn't matter who's killing and taking human life. The fact that no human life should be taken is the bigger deal. Black, white, purple, or green, people have the right to live in peace and not live in fear. And so, I'll say this, some people may not agree with me, I might get a lot of boos, and it's okay, but I'm just saying, I'm serious. So when we look at things like that it's so sad that there are all kinds of movements that are out there, and people are protesting the injustices that are going on in our country, and they should. But I want to say that even in our own communities, there's some policing that we're going to have to do, and there's some protesting that we're going to have to do, because the numbers are too big, they're too large, and we're just seeing Black people killed. And it is through police brutality, it is through various systems of injustice that things are denied Black people. But I want to say to Black people, we got to quit killing ourselves too. We have to do our part. And that's what I said earlier, that I'm always praying and I'm saying, okay, Lord, so what's the message here, and where are we missing it at? And so I just want to say it. They'll tell you in my home, and I'm a very transparent person. My daughter and I were talking the other day, and something happened and it said Black Lives Matter. And I said, no, it doesn't. Black lives don't matter till they matter to Black people. So as a human race, we have to stop killing one another, Black or white. We have got to stop the murdering. And then when it comes to things like, police brutality and things of that nature, Well, that's a whole different subject matter. That's a whole different subject matter because that's an institution that was designed to keep us safe. And when they are not keeping us safe, then justice must be served. So um, I think I mentioned Nakia Crawford and I went in another direction. I don't even know if I really answered your question,
My
but
my
I
big my
just
big
gonna take all
big
of
question big question is because you brought up living in this community uh, for your life, and like you saw the civil rights movement, you saw those pieces. How my actually I'll just narrow it down is like how can we not just make the same, I hate to say mistakes because wonderful things happen, but it
Mhm.
wasn't done. Like it wasn't finished.
Yeah. Well, you are right. It wasn't finished. And I think that what we have to do is we have to not take a pause. That you and I, Ben, talked about it not too long ago when you said, all of a sudden it seems like there are people that have taken to the streets and taken to social media and they've got, almost a rant that they're on. They're going to different protests. They're taking to Facebook and, now they've got their soapbox. And I think I said to you then, I said that the difference was that some people are advocates. They are men and women who have devoted their lives to seeing that justice for all, but especially Black people, occurs in our country. And then I shared how, but as a people, that we all must take some form of action. I tend to hold my money. So I tend to not shop certain places. I tend to not visit certain places. If a company has made it clear that they are not that they are not pro what is right or anti justice, if you will, especially when it's against Black people. I think the mistake that we may have made, even as a people, as Black people, one of the largest consumer groups in our nation, we spend the most money on stuff. And I'm saying that if we want to be heard, then stop spending your money. Stop going to those places and buying a donut or a cup of coffee or a piece of chicken or whatever it is, a hamburger, whatever that is. I think that there is something that happens when people stop shopping, when they stop spending their money. People go out of business. They need your business. So I tend to say, oh, yeah, I'm not ever going to shop there again, or I'm never going to patronize that place again, because it's in fact our dollars that have positioned some people who are part of the problem. So yeah.
Oh man, that is a great segue. So we're gonna start actually with the video that we showed last week, and why I think this is such a good segue is because systemic racism can only be fought, and I heard this as a quote that you'll hear in this, can only be fought by having new systems put in place. And it's not just putting them in place, it's actually looking at the weaknesses of the current one. So we're going to replay this. This has wonderful, wonderful people on it, and then Miss Lori and I will talk about it right afterwards. I'll just pause it at some point, and we'll go from there.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies answer has to do with decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
All right, we're out of the gate. Here we are right now. So I want to start my first question off top, and I'm going to direct this right at Bishop Johnson. Bishop Johnson, what is systemic racism?
Systemic racism is the ongoing, institutional, systematized realities that continue to support those who are white and deny those who are minoritized. And that video is just outstanding. So we can just end the panel right there. We got everything we need. It would seem like we could just step off into the future and solve the problem, but that is the problem. It's so systemic that a lot of times people can't identify what's going on in the system, and the system plays down into implicit bias. And every time I talk about implicit bias, and I do this for companies, churches, whatever, people say, yes, I know I'm prejudiced. I know I'm biased, because that's conscious bias. This is unconscious bias. And so we're not conscious of a lot of those things that take place.
Awesome. And here's the thing, I'm sometimes I'm going to call somebody to get us going, but feel free to jump in. And we're still on that same, and before we saw the video, before we, heard this from Bishop Johnson, Who knew about systemic racism? Was that a real word? Is that a word that we've heard of? I see my hand. I see Judge Parker. So we've all heard of it. So tell me this, Jarrod. When you heard that word systemic racism, what did it mean to you?
Well, some of it is a growth process, you know. So when I first heard it, I had no idea. And I think it is. So when we think racism, at least where I started, it was just individual. I don't like you because of your race. But some of it is just growing and understanding, you know, of understanding, okay, there's more to it. Bishop Johnson, I'd love to hear your thought. I was listening to Pastor Chris Brooks this morning of saying it doesn't necessarily have to imply evil intent either. And so some of that, you know, and I think it's almost frees up to talk about it because everybody's so afraid to be racist. I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist. But sometimes it's not even evil intent, but it is unnecessarily biased against a person without that intent, but it still creates an unfair advantage in the system, in the institution, beyond just individual.
Well, you asked me a question. I'm glad to jump in. Yeah, I don't think that what's impacting America is not white supremacists. That's not the biggest problem. People who are, outwardly racist. What it is that good people who don't know that they have these prejudices are having impact that goes beyond what's taking place, and they don't know it. Let me give you an example I always give to married folks. I said, I'm cleaning the gun. Gun accidentally goes off and shoots you. There's no intent, but guess what? That bullet does the same damage whether you intend it or not. Well, this systemic racism is a gun that is constantly pointed at minorities, and particularly African American. There may be no intent, but there's still impact. And so, yeah, I like to free folks. Stop worrying about whether you didn't create it. You didn't. The question is, are you willing to do something about it for the minorities that are impacted?
So I actually just want to stop there for a minute, Miss Lori, if you're on there watching. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this conversation up actually the next couple weeks, even before, which, by the way, you can watch this full conversation if you'd like. I'm going to put that in the comments below, but you can always go to loveakron.org and go to /watch, WATCH, and that actually has all of the info for you to be able to watch that. So as you're hearing this conversation, you may say, hey, I kind of want to see the rest of that, or hey, I haven't had the opportunity yet. Well, this is going to be a great opportunity to jump on there and to take a look. So huge things that just got talked about, huge things. And this concept of systems of racism. And I think a lot of times people that look like me are like, whoa, I'm not a racist. But it's kind of the wrong conversation. And I love what Bishop Johnson and others are saying on here is that picture of the gun. The effects of that gun are no different. Whatever the intention might be, it's the action that happens, and that's why we want to continue to talk about it. So let's go ahead and jump right back on here and continue our rewatch.
And so this is a good segue. This is why we're doing this today. And this is why we're taking a simple word. Jocelyn, did you have something, sister, that I stopped you from saying? Go ahead.
No, I was smiling. I agree with Bishop Joey in that it really isn't a question of whether you instituted it or who. That's not the question. We know that it exists. I think that also sometimes people become apathetic because it's not something that they caused. They feel like it's something they don't have to deal with because it's not something that they live with individually, or it's not something that's a part of their family, that is something that they're not responsible for. And I think that if you are a person who benefits from systemic racism, and now you can't say you don't know because you've heard it now, then you have to make a specific effort to do what it takes to dismantle something that makes it difficult for other people to live as your neighbors and as fellow citizens. If you don't, then you are making a decision to continue this practice for whatever reason. And that's something that will have its own results.
I appreciate that. Here's the beauty of this, and anybody's going to say something, let's just jump in, let's start talking. One of the biggest reasons why we wanted to do this, and this is just wisdom that I received, is before we can really start having the conversation about race and talking about race, and because I've received a lot of calls the past couple of weeks about, hey, Ken, what do? I don't understand this. The first thing we have to do is we have to get on the same page as far as terms and what terms mean and what this means. And I can remember Bishop told me this a little while ago about, hey, man, this is not about a racist. This is not a singular act. Because a lot of times when we just identify people maybe as a racist, or, you know, a white brother or sister says when all this happens, the first thing they may come and tell me is that, hey, Kip, I'm not a racist. Okay, right? But there's been a system created that has enabled, if you will, a certain amount of behavior. But two, let's not allow the system, if you will, to scapegoat an individual. Because again, it's not an individual thing, it's more of a system. So Judge Parker, I want to go to you because here's the beauty of this. We have someone, you know, we have people from all sectors here. We have the faith community, we have nonprofit,
continue,
we have
I want to
profit.
bring Miss Lori up and on. What I love about this right before it goes into Judge Parker, because last week this was just a huge moment, was and Judge Parker just goes down this huge, wonderful line of thought. But I wanted to give, sorry, Miss Lori, you hit unmute and I hit mute. What's going through your head and heart as you hear this part of the conversation, Miss Lori?
Yeah, say that again as it pertains to.
So this entire thing of, yeah, you're good. It's the fun part about me and Miss Laura is we get to be on live stream together more than we see each other in person. I don't think I've actually seen Miss Lori in person for probably 4 months now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Right?
That's the truth.
Because we've been practicing social distancing,
Yeah.
but we are on live stream a lot together, which is wonderful. But so this going down this thing of systems, and have you had people come up to you, Miss Lori, and said, "Hey, Miss Lori, or Pastor Lori, I'm not a racist." Like almost like a white person needs to tell you that before they're able to talk to you about something. Like, how have you found that to be true, and how have you helped people that look like me, or heck, let's even just use me as the example. How have you helped me actually talk about the stuff rather than live in these silos?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back to when Bishop talked about conscious versus unconscious biases. I think that that many times people think that they're not racist. They think that they are not prejudiced. They think, you know, whatever term people want to use, until something happens that gets your blood to bubbling. And then I think we really find out what's really at our core when we are angered or when we are grossly offended. And so to that, I say, you know, folks have to keep living. We can look at, I hate to, you know, keep going back to this, but I had a thought even about the George Floyd thing. And my thing about that situation was, I think anger played a tremendous part in it. And self-control went completely out the window. So no training in the world prepared that officer for the rage that he must have felt that day. And so when I think in terms of biases of any sort, racism of any sort, I believe that there are things that through all of our lives, in our own families, We've heard comments about other colors of people, things that were not so nice that we wouldn't say on a public platform, if you will. But if the truth be told, in most households, at some point, not saying it was your mom and dad, it could have been Uncle Bob or, Uncle Jackson. But what I'm saying is it has happened. And so when we look at the systems and how do we break down those systems? How do we help people to begin to really see more clearer the injustices and the wrongs that are being done in a way that compels people to really do a for real search on the inside? I have a friend, Laura, and we went to breakfast. We go to breakfast a couple times, maybe 5 or 6 times a year. And she recently came over for shrimp and grits, her and her husband. And I've been to their home before for midweek gatherings and things of that nature. But there were some things that were going on, and it really was a white-black kind of a thing. And I talked to her about it. I mean, we had lunch and I was like, fist on the table, like, really, I'm like, sometimes white people just think like they're the great white hope for the whole wide world, when we know the great hope is Jesus. But I was really upset. By the way, Laura's white. And I was upset, and I was like, Laura, it makes me so angry. Like, I want to just scream from a mountaintop. Like, people are doing things in communities, but they don't live in those communities and they don't stay in those communities. And I was just, going on and on. And my friend Laura just let me talk it out. Needless to say, she didn't stop having lunch with me. We didn't stop being friends because I had an issue with some things that some white folks were doing that I felt kind of sent a different kind of message to Black people in those communities, as if to say, you can't do as good of a job, so move out the way and let us come show you how it's done. We'll come and do it, and then after we're done, we'll leave and go back. We'll ride back out on our horse until the next time we need to come back. And so it was amazing to me because Laura went home, and maybe a couple of days later, she called me and she was just like, I can't shake what you said. And she was like, and you are right. She said, oh my God, I never saw it that way before. And you were right. And so there was some things that she did on her own. And she said, I can't make up for the way the world is, but maybe I can do something that will make a difference in the life of someone. And so she, on 3 occasions, extended a kind gesture that I was able to sort of pay forward to someone who needed it more than both of us. So I
want to just zero in on that for just a second, Miss Lori, is because now getting to have this conversation a number of times with Bishop, every time I ask him, like, hey man, I'm the ignorant white male, help me here, I need help, that kind of thing. And he's like, one person at a time, man. One person at a time. Yeah. So if people, I hear a lot of people say, I just don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. Well, at the end of the day, make a friend.
Yeah.
and be a good friend. Like, because good friends, man, they're not gonna, like, I have a buddy of mine that I get together with. He plays drums with me. Love this guy. And we just get together and we'll talk for hours, man. Yeah. Like, about nothing, about everything. And that right there but to do that with somebody that doesn't look like me, or I guess for you, it would be somebody that looks like me, but not with the beard. The beard, by the way, little side point, they won't shave your beard at the barber anymore because they have to wear a mask the whole time. I was like, oh, you can't do that? So I'm thinking that's a little noticeable. Just throwing that out there. But let's go ahead and jump back into it.
But let me tell you this. I'm glad that you said that about one person at a time. And I want those watching to really grasp this, because Laura and I are friends because I gave a challenge at the Akron altar call, the last one that was had. And my challenge to people was, Find someone that does not look like you. If you're Black, find a white person. If you're white, find a person of color, African American. Find somebody of a different ethnicity and get their number and share a cup of coffee. And we're going to find out that we all are the human race, and we are more alike than we are different. And Laura actually walked up to me toward the end of the altar call. She was beet red, looked like she was sick as I don't know what. And her husband, Isaiah, was there with her. And she walked up and she said, I heard what you said, and the Holy Spirit tugged on my heart, but I thought I could brush it off. And we were on our way to the car. And she said, she told her husband, I have to go back and get that lady's number. And so she asked me, she said, can I get your number? And I said, girl, yeah. Gave her my number. And we've been doing breakfast ever since. But I say this, I said it earlier on Love Akron Connect. I'm going to say it anytime I'm given a platform to say it, because people need to understand this. People say, oh, I've got Black friends. Oh, I got white friends. And my question is, okay, your daughter got married last year. Did they get an invitation to the wedding? Oh, well, no. Oh, why? Oh, because they don't know my daughter. Oh, why? And so it happened in a church, and the lady said, oh yeah, that's my friend. And I said, oh, you guys get together on the holidays and do family things together? And she was like, no. I said, oh, do you guys do barbecues or go to the park in the summer? She's like, no. I was like, oh, do you guys get together for coffee or dinner or something sometime? She said, no, we just go to church together. I said, oh, that is not your friend. That is just someone you know. And so I think Bishop says relationship, Bishop Joey Johnson, House of the Lord, Bethel, right, says that relationships are everything. And he is absolutely correct. Because see, if I don't, how do we dismiss these conscious and unconscious biases? How do we rid ourselves of systemic injustices? Well, first of all, we have to get rid of the lies, the stereotypes, and you have to get to know people and sit down and break bread with them. You have to invite them into your home. They have to become a part of your family. And so I did warn Laura, I said, hey girl, I'm gonna invite y'all over for a holiday because y'all need to see this spread, right? And I love to cook. And I said, but let me warn you, my brother, who is a good guy, I love him with all my heart. I said, but he is loud and he yells all the time. I said, so I don't want y'all to be freaked out. Like, he's not violent or anything. He just don't know how to talk at a normal tone, right? So we laughed about that. And of course, my brother did come by the last time we were together, and you wouldn't know that he was so calm and collective and high, that kind of thing. I'm like, really?
Yeah, go figure. But
Yeah.
But what you're defining though is, I think, because of our cultures really watering down of words. Like somebody, my buddy, actually my drummer friend and I were talking just yesterday, and I was like, he's like, oh, you're friends with so-and-so. I'm like, who? And they're like, he's like, he's your Facebook friend. And I'm like, buddy, like, I mean, don't hear me wrong. I'm glad people like me on Facebook and connect with me and stuff like that. But not everybody on Facebook's coming over to the Beaver's house for Thanksgiving. And that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. But when we start using the same terminology to say
Yeah.
my acquaintance is my friend,
Yes.
we're actually doing a disservice to the process.
Yep.
And but I want to keep. We're just going to listen to a little bit more of this conversation, but I can say fully that with what I've gotten to see from Miss Lori, even to me as a white younger man, like it's been this at points for Miss Lori and I.
Oh, to say the least, it's been like this.
See, everybody sees us here, and it's not that it was like anything like awful, but there were moments, man, where it was like, whoa, what's this redhead?
We had to say, hey, that can't happen no more,
Yeah.
Or when you did this, it made me feel like that. And that, Ben, that's the thing about, if a person is your friend and you want to work on relationship with them, you got to be honest. I mean, everybody in my house knows Ben's name. something will happen. I'll say, oh God. They'll say, what, Ben? And I'll say, no, not Ben today. Right. I mean,
I'm sure they do.
They only know his name, right? Because he has driven me to learn technology in a way that I don't want to. And he makes me crazy some days. My brain is on fire some days. But at the end of the day, at the core, I love Ben. And I know that I believe that if I got in trouble at 3:00 in the morning, I could call his house. And and I've never met his wife yet, other than a picture on Facebook. But I'm sure she's heard about me too. And I believe that he would get up and come to my rescue if I was in trouble and needed help and couldn't find anybody else to come bail me out of jail. That was supposed
100, yeah, not real situation yet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
Not ever.
100%, and I love you too, Miss Lori. And that literally, I guess what I'm saying is there's a level of sparks that happen, a level of grace that has to happen, but it can only happen through true relationships. We're just going to watch just a little bit more of this, not too much more. We'll have more next week. I do want to invite everyone out, but there is but 100%, and I love you too, Miss Lori, and that literally.
Are you hearing me twice?
I guess what I'm saying is there's a level of sparks that happen, a level of grace that has to happen in my life, but it can only happen.
So there we go.
But the piece that comes up next here is just, it's fascinating hearing from our friend, our magistrate friend. Let's take a listen here.
And we have, our government in both these sets. So when we talk about systemic racism, Judge Parker, how are you seeing that as being one that sits on the bench?
Well, I can't divorce myself from life itself. As I go through society, it does not take a great scientist to drive around the community and see the effects of the redlining that was described in that video we watched. So you don't have to be a judge to see that. So we see the long-term pervasive effects of hundreds of years of a system being operated that has treated people differently and has primarily been for the benefit of one of those groups of people. So on the bench, I'm responsible to not create the laws of the United States. I'm responsible to apply and make sure that those laws are fairly enforced. That's one of the biggest issues that we're all wrestling with right now as we've seen the events the last few weeks. All right, we need to make change. How do we go about doing that? Do we use the system we have in place, or do we destroy that system? Everybody likes order. I don't care who they are. They like to know that they can come home and be safe at night. So we have a system in place that is supposed to allow that to occur. So as a person who sits on the bench, my job is to make sure that the ideals that this country says it was founded on get implemented in person, at the place, at the time. I was greatly impacted a while back on my own journey when I read something that James Baldwin wrote back in the 1950s when he was in Europe and he was contemplating coming back to the United States. And he said that he wanted to find out what could happen. My phone's ringing. Sorry for that. He wanted to find out what would happen in the United States. But he said the first thing he had to come to grips with was the myth of America. Now, that sounds like a harsh thing to say, but from my perspective, we've got a set of constitutional ideals that say that we regard everyone as equal. And we know that over the history of our country, those ideals have not been met. So my job as an individual judge is to make sure that I don't have a myth of America in my courtroom. My job is to make sure that the ideals on which this country says it was founded get implemented by this one individual at that one time in that one case. So I try to fight against the effects of it every single day. So when the government asks for somebody to be held in jail while their case is pending trial, I have to decide, Should the person be released on bond or not? That's an important decision. People are presumed innocent. So I've got to apply the standards in a way that is consistent with the ideals of America and not some practice that's been implemented over hundreds of years. Long answer, sorry.
So, man, you got me with this myth of America. What do you mean? Like America is the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? I mean, that's what I know about America. At least that's what I read in my history book when I was going through, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Like you're saying, and what I'm hearing is, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe these earbuds are not coming through, but so that's a myth, right? That's a myth that I thought this was the land of the free and the home of the brave, right?
Brother Kemp?
So, yes.
Can I step in here?
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge Parker. Thank you so very much. That is exactly the idea that I follow. It is a myth to some degree, especially when you were speaking about the Constitution. The Constitution wasn't written for people who look like me. And so because I understand that, of course, we have amendments that allow certain things for people who do look like me. But I do understand that the Constitution wasn't written for someone who looks like me. So for groups, people of African descent, I don't like to say slaves because I have my own ideologies about that. But people of African descent, it wasn't written for us. And because we understand that, or some of us understand that, there's going to be things, that's where systemic racism comes in place. Okay. That's where it begins from the beginning. And if we talk about the history of this country, we have to understand that my ancestors came here as in chattel slavery. Okay. And so there was an idea that we weren't completely human. All right. So those ideals weren't meant to impact lives like mine. And because I start with that understanding, I understand that there is a myth. There's a few different stories happening when we're talking about how the country was formed, how it was built. And now we're living in the residual of what those laws are put in place. So there are some people who do not feel free in the land of the free.
Man,
have to be brave.
See, this conversation is so good. To know even where would be appropriate to stop, I wouldn't. So we're actually going to continue this next week. You can watch all the conversation. It's actually right here in the comments below. But real quick, this idea, Miss Lori, just kind of final thoughts together. The American myth. What's going on in Miss Lori's heart? Yeah, your microphone isn't on, so whatever's going on in your heart sounds great. But
there's a ton of American myths, because really, what are myths? They're just stories, right? That are sometimes held true, but in fact are in most cases false. They are made up sometimes of beliefs and ideas. So when we talk about, the myth of America, that would be a myth, that it is the home of the
land of the free and the home of the brave. You're like,
yeah, I can't even figure it out, right? Because it don't even apply, because it is not the land of the free. And it is not always the home of the brave. It takes a lot of cowardness to do some of the divisive things that have been done to people of color in our country. And so land of the free, yep, no. Home of the brave, sometimes. But I think, going away from that and listening to the judge who says, I have to decide whether or not that person deserves to stay in jail. Are they a threat to society? Are they a threat where they will flee the country? Is this their first offense? And we've seen people with first offenses, all sort of things happen. Matter of fact, I could name you a location where a cousin of mine was killed. Stepped out in front of a bus and was hit by a white girl and killed. And the girl didn't spend a day in jail, didn't nothing. I remember this. It happened probably 30 years ago or more. And I remember there being an accident with a Black person where a white person died, and they got vehicular manslaughter. And so when you grow up watching all of those things all the time, and you can see that just like that girl was just driving down the street and came on alongside of a bus, didn't know this other person's driving down the street, lost control of their car. It was not an intent. It was not their intent. And so I just say that we have a ton of work to do, but we can, what did the song say? Day at a time, sweet Jesus. That's all I'm asking of you. It has to be one day at a time, one person at a time, one family at a time, one church or whatever your faith is at a time, one community at a time, one state at a time, and then it will affect our country and perhaps our world. But it's one at a time.
Huge, huge. And just to encourage anyone that is either watching this live or watching this later today, one, the whole conversation and other conversations like it are in this right in the comment thread. It's loveakron.org/watch, and we curated a number of conversations that are helpful down this. And I would say as well, if you just need help starting these conversations with someone, if you're looking for one, contact us. We would love to connect with you and start relationships, and it'll be awkward for about 5-10 minutes. And then after that, you'll find out that we're awkward people, and it's all okay. It'll be great. But please, my heart, I was telling Coach this just the other day. My heart is that this wouldn't be a fad. And I don't want to treat it as a fad because I can't unsee what I've seen. So, well, thank you, Miss Lori, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I love getting to talk with my my friend right here on my live stream friend that I haven't actually seen personally in 4 months. But you are my friend, and I love you.
And we've managed to fight via Zoom. So I mean,
they should have like a little like almost like a video game down at the bottom where you can like fight each other a little bit.
I know.
We've hashed stuff out and we'll continue to, but I'm better because of you, Miss Lori, and appreciate everybody watching. And if you don't do anything else today, make sure that you love Akron. See you guys.